There's something about driving alone late at night that strips away the safety of the ordinary world. The darkness pressing against your windows, the endless stretch of empty road ahead, the way your headlights seem to create the only reality that exists. During these hours when most people are safe in their beds, the roads belong to something else. Tonight, we bring you 4 disturbing true stories from people who experienced the unthinkable while driving through the darkest hours. These aren't urban legends or campfire tales. These are accounts from ordinary people who got behind the wheel expecting a routine drive and encountered something that changed them forever. Some of them still drive, though never at night. Others sold their cars and refused to travel after sunset. All of them carry the memory of what they saw, what followed them, what waited for them on roads that should have been empty. Lock your doors. Keep your eyes on the road ahead, and whatever you do, don't stop for anyone. These are 4 disturbing, true, late-night driving horror stories. Story 1. The Thing That Followed Me Home. My name is Daniel Ashworth, and I need to tell someone what happened to me on the night of October 14th, 2019. I've tried talking to therapists, to friends, to family members, but no one believes me. They think I fell asleep at the wheel and had a nightmare, or that the stress of my job finally broke something in my mind. But I know what I saw. I know what followed me for 63 miles down a highway in rural Pennsylvania. And I know it's still out there, waiting on that stretch of road for the next driver to pass through alone. I was 34 years old at the time, working as an IT consultant for a firm based in Philadelphia. The job required frequent travel to client sites, sometimes several hours away, and I'd grown accustomed to long drives through the Pennsylvania countryside. That particular week, I'd been stationed at a manufacturing plant near Erie, helping them migrate their systems to new servers. The work ran late on my final day, and by the time I finished the documentation and said goodbye to the plant manager, it was already past 11 at night. I should have found a hotel. That's what any sensible person would have done. But I was tired of living out of a suitcase, tired of sleeping in unfamiliar beds, and the thought of being home in my own apartment was too appealing to resist. The drive was about 5 hours. I'd done it before in worse conditions. I grabbed a large coffee from a gas station, loaded up a podcast on my phone, and headed south on Route 19. The first 2 hours passed without incident. The road was empty, which wasn't unusual for a Tuesday night in mid-October. I passed through small towns that were already dark and sleeping, their streetlights casting orange pools on deserted sidewalks. The podcast kept me company, some true crime show I'd been meaning to catch up on, and my coffee kept me alert. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I first noticed the figure. I was on a stretch of Route 19 that cut through dense forest, the kind of area where the trees pressed so close to the road that your headlights seemed to be swallowed by an endless wall of darkness. There were no streetlights out here, no houses, no signs of human habitation, just the road, my car, and the night. The figure was standing at the edge of my headlight range, maybe 200 feet ahead on the right shoulder. My first thought was that it was a deer, and I slowed down instinctively, ready to brake if it decided to bolt across the road. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't a deer. It was humanoid, standing upright on 2 legs. But there was something fundamentally wrong with its proportions. It was too tall. I don't mean basketball player tall or even unusually tall. I mean impossibly tall, 8 feet at least, maybe 9. Its limbs were elongated, arms hanging past where its knees should have been, and it was thin in a way that living things aren't supposed to be thin, like someone had taken a normal human body and stretched it on a rack until the bones nearly poked through the skin. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a weird shadow cast by a dead tree, or maybe a road sign that my tired brain was misinterpreting. But then the thing moved. Its head turned toward my car as I approached, a slow rotation that tracked my movement with precision. I couldn't make out facial features, couldn't see eyes or a mouth, but I felt it watching me. The sensation was physical, a pressure against my skin, like standing too close to a fire. I accelerated. My foot pressed the gas pedal before my conscious mind made the decision, some primal part of my brain screaming at me to get away from this thing as fast as possible. My car shot forward, and I kept my eyes locked on the road ahead, refusing to look at the figure as I passed it. In my rearview mirror, I watched it step onto the road behind me. One long jointed leg extending onto the asphalt, then the other. It stood in the center of the lane I'd just occupied, and then it started walking in my direction. I was doing 70 miles an hour. There was no way anything on foot could keep pace with my car. But when I looked in the mirror again 30 seconds later, the figure was still visible, still walking, and it didn't seem any farther away. That was when the real fear hit me. Not the startled surprise of seeing something unexpected, but deep, bone-level terror. The kind of fear that makes your hands shake and your vision narrow and your thoughts scatter into static. This thing was following me, and whatever it was, it didn't obey the normal rules of speed and distance. I pushed my car up to 85, then 90. The engine whined in protest, and my tires hummed against the asphalt with a sound that seemed too loud in the silence. My phone had lost signal miles ago, so calling for help wasn't an option. All I could do was drive and hope that I could outrun something that shouldn't have been able to keep pace with me at any speed. For the next 20 minutes, I drove like a man possessed. I took curves too fast, nearly losing control twice when my tires skidded on patches of gravel. My coffee spilled across the passenger seat, forgotten and irrelevant. Every few seconds I checked my mirror, and every time the figure was still there, still walking, still maintaining that impossible pace. Then it started getting closer. I don't know how to explain what I saw. The figure wasn't running, wasn't even moving its legs any faster than before. But with each glance in my mirror, it had covered more distance, as if the space between us was compressing, folding in on itself to bring us closer together. At 90 miles an hour, I was losing ground to something that was walking. I started praying. I'm not a religious person, haven't been to church since I was a teenager. But in that moment, I prayed to every god I could name, and several I made up on the spot. I begged for help, for protection, for anything that might save me from the thing that was slowly, inexorably catching up to my car. The figure was close enough now that my taillights illuminated it clearly. I could see more details than I wanted to see. The skin, if it was skin, was gray and textured like bark. The limbs bent at too many joints, folding and unfolding with each step in ways that made my stomach turn. And the head, that featureless oval that had tracked my movement, was tilted at an angle that suggested curiosity. It was studying me, learning me, and it was patient because it knew it would catch me eventually. I saw lights ahead, a gas station, its fluorescent sign glowing like a beacon of salvation in the darkness. I didn't care that I had half a tank of fuel. I didn't care about anything except getting out of the darkness and into that pool of artificial light. I pulled into the station at a speed that nearly took out one of the pumps. My brakes screamed, my car fishtailed, and I came to a stop inches from a concrete barrier. For a moment, I just sat there, gripping the steering wheel, hyperventilating, unable to move. When I finally found the courage to look in my mirror, the road behind me was empty. I spent the next 4 hours in that gas station. The attendant, a middle-aged man named Earl, let me sit in the back room and drink terrible coffee while I tried to stop shaking. I told him I'd seen something on the road, but I couldn't bring myself to describe it. He nodded like he understood. Said this stretch of Route 19 had a reputation. Said I wasn't the first person to come in looking like they'd seen the devil himself. He didn't ask what I saw. He didn't offer any explanations. He just let me sit there until the sun came up and the darkness retreated, and I felt safe enough to get back behind the wheel. I made it home by noon. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that, I didn't tell anyone what had happened. Not then. I tried to convince myself that exhaustion and stress had combined to create a hallucination, that my tired brain had manufactured a monster from shadows and fear. Then I got the pictures developed. I'd forgotten that my dash cam had been running the entire drive. It was an old model that recorded to an SD card, and I hadn't thought to check it until weeks later, when I was looking for evidence of a minor fender bender in a parking lot. I scrolled through the footage, looking for the parking lot incident, and I found the recording from October 14th instead. The footage showed exactly what I remembered. The empty highway, the wall of trees, my headlights cutting through the darkness, and there, at the edge of the frame, the figure. The impossibly tall, wrong-jointed thing that had followed me for 63 miles. The camera had captured it clearly. Too clearly. I could see details I'd missed in my panic. Details I wish I could unsee. The way its fingers were too long and bent backward at the tips. The way its torso seemed to ripple as it moved, like something was shifting beneath the bark-like skin. The way its head rotated to track the camera with an awareness that suggested intelligence, malevolence, intent. The footage confirmed I hadn't imagined it. The footage confirmed that something had followed me that night, something that could keep pace with a car doing 90 miles an hour while never braking from a slow, deliberate walk. I deleted the footage. I know I should have kept it, should have shown it to someone, but I couldn't bear to have it on my phone. Every time I thought about watching it again, my hands would start shaking and my heart would race and I would feel that same pressure against my skin, that sensation of being watched by something that didn't belong in this world. I don't drive at night anymore. I've rearranged my entire life around being home before sunset. I've turned down promotions that would require travel, ended relationships that couldn't accommodate my fear. My therapist thinks I have PTSD, that I experienced some kind of trauma that my mind has processed as a supernatural encounter. She might be right. I hope she's right. But sometimes when I'm driving during the day and I pass a stretch of road that reminds me of that night in Pennsylvania, I check my rearview mirror, and sometimes, just for a moment, I think I see something standing at the edge of the tree line, too tall and too thin and too patient, waiting for the sun to go down. It's been 5 years since that night. I've never seen the figure again, but I know it's still out there, on that stretch of Route 19, waiting for another driver to pass through, alone in the dark hours when the roads belong to something else. And I know that if I ever drive that road at night again, it will follow me. It will follow me, and this time, there might not be a gas station to save me. Story 2. The Detour Through Nowhere. My name is Samantha Reyes, and I want to tell you about the night my GPS led me somewhere that doesn't exist. I've searched for this place on every map I can find, asked locals who've lived in the area their entire lives, even hired a private investigator to look into it. Nothing, no record, no history, no evidence that the town I drove through on the night of March 7th, 2021 has ever existed. But I was there. I drove through its streets. I spoke to its residents. And I will never, for as long as I live, forget what I saw in the church at the center of town. I was 28 years old at the time, working as a traveling nurse in rural Texas. The job took me to small towns and remote clinics, places where healthcare was scarce and my skills were desperately needed. I'd grown comfortable with long drives through empty country, with the isolation of roads that stretched for miles without a single house or gas station. That night, I was driving from a clinic in Marfa to a hospital in Odessa, a route I'd taken several times before. It was about a 3-hour drive, mostly on Highway 17 before connecting to Interstate 20. I'd left Marfa around 9 p.m., planning to arrive in Odessa by midnight. The trouble started about an hour into the drive. My GPS, which had been working fine, suddenly recalculated my route. Instead of continuing straight on Highway 17, it instructed me to take a right turn onto a road I didn't recognize. The voice calmly announced that there was a faster route available, and that I would save 23 minutes by taking this detour. I should have ignored it. I knew Highway 17, knew it was the right way to go, but I was tired and trusting, and the idea of saving 20 minutes was appealing. So I took the turn. The road was paved but poorly maintained, the kind of route that had probably been a county highway decades ago before being abandoned in favor of newer construction. My headlights illuminated cracked asphalt, faded lane markings, and the occasional rusted sign that was too weathered to read. I drove for about 30 minutes without seeing another car, another house, another sign of human life. The landscape was flat and featureless, scrubland stretching to the horizon in every direction. My GPS showed me on a road that didn't appear on any other map I could find, heading toward a destination that simply read, "Continue straight." That was when I started to feel uneasy. I pulled over to check my phone, thinking I would call up Google Maps and verify my location, but I had no signal. Not low signal, not 1 bar, but absolutely nothing. My phone showed no service in the corner, which shouldn't have been possible. Even in the most remote parts of Texas, there's usually some coverage. I decided to turn around. Whatever shortcut my GPS thought it had found, I didn't trust it anymore. But when I made a U-turn and headed back the way I'd come, the road seemed different. The cracks in the asphalt were in different places. The rusted signs were facing different directions. And no matter how long I drove, I couldn't find the turn that would take me back to Highway 17. I was lost in a way I'd never been lost before. Not just uncertain of my location, but uncertain of the reality around me. The stars above were wrong, constellations I didn't recognize scattered across a sky that seemed too close, too bright, too full. Then I saw the lights of a town ahead. Relief flooded through me. A town meant people, meant someone who could give me directions, meant a gas station where I could buy a map and figure out where I'd gone wrong. I accelerated toward those lights, eager to escape the wrongness of the empty road. The town appeared suddenly, as if it had simply materialized out of the darkness. One moment, there was nothing but scrubland. The next, I was passing a sign that read, "Welcome to Harlan's Crossing, population 847, founded 1892. The sign looked new, the paint fresh and glossy, but the style was old-fashioned, like something from a century ago. The main street was lit by old-style street lamps, their bulbs casting warm yellow light on buildings that looked like they'd been preserved from the Old West. A general store, a bank, a hotel, a church. Cars were parked along the street, but they were old models, vehicles from the 1940s and 1950s that gleamed like they'd just rolled off the assembly line. I slowed my car to a crawl, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. My first thought was that I'd stumbled onto some kind of historical district, a tourist attraction built to recreate the Old West, but at 11 p.m. on a Sunday night, there shouldn't have been anyone there. Yet people walked along the sidewalks, couples and families dressed in clothing that matched the era of the cars. One of them noticed me. A man in a brown suit and fedora stopped walking and turned to face my car. His expression was blank at first, then slowly shifted to something that might have been recognition. He raised his hand and pointed at me, and the other people on the street turned to look. I should have driven away. Every instinct told me to floor the accelerator and get out of this place as fast as possible. But my car had other ideas. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. I coasted to a stop in front of the church, a white clapboard building with a tall steeple that seemed to reach toward those unfamiliar stars. The people of Harlan's Crossing gathered around my car. There were about 20 of them, all dressed in period clothing, all wearing expressions of calm curiosity. A woman in a blue dress approached my window and smiled. She said they didn't get many visitors. She said the roads to Harlan's Crossing had been closed for a long time. She said I must be tired from my journey, that I should come inside the church and rest, that the Reverend would want to meet me. I didn't want to get out of my car. I didn't want anything to do with this town or its residents or its church. But when I tried to restart my engine, nothing happened. The car was completely dead. No power, no lights, nothing. I was stranded. The woman opened my door. I don't remember unlocking it, but the door swung open as if I had, and she extended her hand with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I took it, unable to resist, unable to do anything but let her guide me toward the church. The inside of the building was lit by candles, hundreds of them lining every surface and filling the air with the smell of burning wax. Pews stretched toward an altar at the far end, and the pews were occupied. People sat in rows, facing forward, absolutely motionless. As I was led down the center aisle, I realized they weren't just sitting. They were posed. Their hands were folded in their laps. Their backs were straight. Their eyes were open and staring, but none of them were breathing. They weren't alive. They were bodies preserved somehow, arranged in the pews like mannequins in a display. Some of them wore modern clothing, jeans and t-shirts and sneakers, outfits that were completely out of place in this old West town. I saw a woman in a nurse's uniform similar to mine. I saw a man in a truck driver's jacket. I saw a teenager holding a cell phone that was clutched in fingers that had turned gray and stiff. These were travelers. These were people like me. People who had taken a wrong turn and ended up in Harlan's Crossing. And these were their final resting places, preserved and displayed in this church like trophies in a hunter's lodge. The Reverend was waiting at the altar. He was an old man in black robes, his face lined and weathered, his eyes a shade of blue that seemed to glow in the candlelight. He smiled when he saw me, a genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made him look like someone's kindly grandfather. He said I was welcome in Harlan's Crossing. He said I had arrived at an auspicious time, that the congregation had been waiting for a new member. He said I would come to love it here, just like all the others had. Once I accepted that there was no way back, I ran. I don't know where the strength came from, but I tore my arm free from the woman who'd led me inside, and I ran back down that aisle, past the rows of preserved travelers, through the doors and out into the night. Behind me, I heard the Reverend laughing, a soft chuckle that seemed to come from everywhere at once. My car was still dead. I sprinted past it, heading down the main street toward the edge of town. The residents of Harlan's Crossing watched me go but didn't follow. They just stood there, smiling their strange smiles, waving goodbye as if I were a guest leaving after a pleasant visit. I ran until the town was behind me, until the lights of those old-fashioned street lamps faded into darkness. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, until I collapsed on the side of that cracked and weathered road, gasping for breath. When I looked up, I could see headlights in the distance. Real headlights, modern headlights, approaching from the direction I'd been running. I stood in the middle of the road and waved my arms until the vehicle stopped. It was a pickup truck, driven by a rancher on his way home from checking on his cattle. He asked me what I was doing out here, how I'd ended up on this abandoned road in the middle of nowhere. I tried to tell him about Harlan's Crossing, about the church and the bodies and the Reverend, but when I turned to point back the way I'd come, there was nothing there. Just empty scrubland, flat and featureless, stretching to the horizon. The rancher drove me back to Highway 17. It was only about 10 miles from where he'd found me, though I was certain I'd driven much farther than that. He said the road I'd been on was an old county route that had been closed for decades, that there hadn't been any town out there since before he was born. I asked him if he'd ever heard of Harlan's Crossing. His face went pale. He said his grandmother used to tell stories about a town by that name, a place that had disappeared during the Dust Bowl years, a place where the residents had made a deal with something they shouldn't have to survive the drought. He said it was just a ghost story, something to scare children, but the way he said it, I knew he wasn't sure. I reported my car stolen because I couldn't explain what had really happened to it. The insurance company found it 3 weeks later, abandoned on the side of a road near Marfa. The engine was in perfect working order. The tank was full of gas, and in the back seat, they found a single candle, white wax partially burned, smelling faintly of something sweet. I quit my job as a traveling nurse. I couldn't handle the long drives anymore, couldn't handle being alone on empty roads where wrong turns might lead to places that don't appear on any map. I work in a hospital now, a big city hospital with regular hours and well-lit parking lots, but I still think about Harlan's Crossing. I still think about the church and the preserved travelers, and the reverend who said there was no way back. I think about how close I came to joining that congregation, to becoming another trophy in those candlelit pews. And sometimes, when I'm driving during the day and my GPS suggests an alternate route, I ignore it. I stay on the main roads, the roads that appear on every map, the roads that lead to places that definitely exist, because I know that somewhere out there, in a fold of reality that shouldn't be possible, Harlan's Crossing is still waiting. The candles are still burning. The congregation is still growing, and the Reverend is still smiling, patient and kind, welcoming the next lost traveler who takes a wrong turn in the dark. Story 3. The Woman on Route 112. My name is Michael Chen, and I need to confess what I did on the night of August 23, 2018. What I did, and what was done to me because of it. I've never told anyone the full story, not the police, not my wife, not the therapist who diagnosed me with acute stress disorder. I've carried this secret for years, and it's been eating me alive. I was 31 years old at the time, driving home from a business conference in Phoenix. The conference had run late, and I'd had a few drinks at the networking event afterward, enough to make me probably over the legal limit, but not enough to make me feel impaired. I know that's not an excuse. I know I should have called a cab or gotten a hotel room, but I was arrogant and impatient, and convinced that the 3-hour drive to my home in Flagstaff would be fine. I took Route 112, a 2-lane highway that cuts through the desert between the two cities. It's a lonely road, especially at night, with miles of nothing between the scattered towns and rest stops. I'd driven it dozens of times before without incident. The first 2 hours were uneventful. I played music loud to keep myself alert, rolled down the windows to let the cool desert air fill the car. The alcohol was wearing off, replaced by exhaustion, but I was more than halfway home. I could make it. It was around 1:15 in the morning when I saw her. She was standing on the shoulder of the road, waving her arms. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, wearing a white dress that seemed to glow in my headlights. Her car was pulled off to the side, the hood up, smoke or steam rising from the engine. I should have stopped. That's what any decent person would have done. But I was tired and still slightly buzzed, and I told myself that someone else would help her, that she probably had a phone, that stopping for a stranger on a deserted highway was dangerous. I drove past her. I watched in my rearview mirror as her arms dropped to her sides, as she turned to watch my car disappear into the darkness. The guilt hit me immediately, sharp and painful, but I kept driving. I told myself I'd call for help when I got a signal, that I'd report a stranded motorist and let the professionals handle it. I never made that call. By the time I reached Flagstaff, I'd convinced myself that someone else had surely stopped, that the woman was fine, that there was no point in reporting something that had probably already been resolved. I went home, went to bed, and tried to forget the image of her standing alone on that dark highway. The nightmares started the next night. In the dreams, I was back on Route 112, driving the same stretch of road. But this time, I stopped. I pulled over behind the woman's car and got out to help. She turned to face me, and I saw that her white dress was stained with dark patches that spread as I watched. Her face was pale, too pale, and her eyes were hollow pits that seemed to absorb all the light around them. She asked me why I didn't stop. She asked me if I knew what happened to her after I drove away. She asked me if I wanted to see. I would wake up screaming, covered in sweat, my wife shaking me and asking what was wrong. I couldn't tell her. I couldn't tell anyone. How do you explain that you're being haunted by your own cowardice, by the woman you abandoned on a dark road in the middle of nowhere? The dreams got worse each night. They lasted longer, showed me more. I saw what happened after I drove past. I saw the next car that came along, driven by a man who wasn't looking to help. I saw what he did to the woman in the white dress, the things that happened on the side of Route 112 while I slept peacefully in my bed. I started seeing her when I was awake. The first time was about a week after that night. I was driving to work, stopped at a red light, and I saw her in my rearview mirror. She was standing on the sidewalk behind my car, wearing that same white dress, watching me with those hollow eyes. When I turned to look through my back window, she was gone. After that, she was everywhere, in crowds at the grocery store, standing just at the edge of my peripheral vision. In the parking lot at my office, visible for just a moment between rows of cars. In the window of my house when I came home at night, a pale shape that vanished when I walked through the door. My wife thought I was having a breakdown. Maybe I was. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't focus on anything except the woman I'd left behind. I started searching for news stories about Route 112, about stranded motorists, about women in white dresses. I found her. Her name was Jennifer Vasquez. She was 26 years old, a teacher at an elementary school in Phoenix. On the night of August 23, 2018, her car broke down on Route 112. She was found the next morning by a passing trucker, a mile from where her car had been abandoned. The police report said she'd been the victim of a violent crime, that she died sometime in the early hours of the morning. The time of death was estimated at approximately 2:30 a.m., more than an hour after I'd driven past her. If I had stopped, she might still be alive. If I had called for help, someone might have reached her in time. Instead, I'd kept driving, too selfish and scared to do the right thing. And Jennifer Vasquez had died alone on the side of a desert highway. The guilt almost killed me. I stopped eating, stopped leaving my house, stopped doing anything except sitting in the dark and thinking about that night. My wife begged me to see a doctor, and I finally agreed, hoping that medication might quiet the images that haunted my every waking moment. The doctor prescribed pills for anxiety and depression. They didn't help. They didn't help because what I was experiencing wasn't a chemical imbalance or a psychological disorder. It was something else entirely. Jennifer came to me on the 1-year anniversary of her death. I was lying in bed, unable to sleep as usual, when I felt a weight settle on the mattress beside me. The room was dark, but I could see her shape, the white dress glowing faintly, her hollow eyes fixed on my face. She asked me if I remembered her. I said yes. I remembered. I would always remember. She asked me if I knew what guilt felt like. I said yes. I knew. The guilt was destroying me. She asked me if I wanted forgiveness. I said yes. More than anything, I wanted forgiveness. She smiled. It was a terrible smile, full of teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. She said forgiveness had to be earned. She said I had to understand what she experienced, what I could have prevented, what my cowardice had cost her. She said she would show me night after night until I truly understood. That was when the real nightmares began. Every night for the next year, I lived through Jennifer's final hours, not as an observer, but as her. I felt the relief when headlights appeared on the highway, felt the hope that someone had finally stopped to help. I felt the confusion when the driver didn't act like someone offering assistance. I felt the fear, the pain, the desperate prayers for someone to save me. I felt everything Jennifer felt. Every night, for hours that seemed to stretch into eternities. I would wake up with her screams still echoing in my ears, with the phantom sensation of injuries I hadn't received, with the absolute certainty that I had experienced death and been dragged back to experience it again. My wife left me after 6 months. She said she couldn't watch me destroy myself, couldn't handle waking up to my screaming every night. I didn't blame her. I couldn't blame anyone except myself. The visions stopped on the 2nd anniversary of Jennifer's death. I woke up that morning and she was standing at the foot of my bed, still wearing the white dress, still watching with those hollow eyes. But her expression was different now. softer. She said I understood now. She said I had felt what she felt, lived what she lived, died the way she died. She said the debt was paid, but the memory would remain. She said she would be watching, waiting to see what I did with the second chance I'd been given. Then she was gone. Not just from my room, but from my life. The nightmares stopped. The visions stopped. I was left alone with my memories and my guilt, and the absolute certainty that I had been punished by something beyond human understanding. I changed after that. I volunteer now at a crisis center, answering phones late at night when people need someone to listen. I donate to charities that help victims of violent crimes. I stop every time I see someone stranded on the road, no matter how inconvenient, no matter how scared I feel. I've never told anyone the truth about what happened to me. How do you explain being haunted by a woman whose death you could have prevented? How do you describe living through someone else's final moments, night after night, until you understand their suffering as intimately as your own? Jennifer Vasquez is buried in a cemetery in Phoenix. I visit her grave every year on August 23rd. I bring flowers and I sit there for hours talking to her headstone, telling her about the things I've done to make amends. I don't know if she can hear me. I don't know if she's at peace or if some part of her is still out there, watching to see if I've truly changed. But I know that I owe her everything, that her death and her visitation saved me from becoming someone I wouldn't want to be. The woman on Route 112 taught me what it means to be responsible for another person's life. She taught me that looking away has consequences, that cowardice leaves scars on your soul that never fully heal, and she taught me that some debts can only be paid in suffering. Story 4. The Thing in the Back Seat. My name is Rebecca Torres, and I survived the night of November 11th, 2022. I'm the only one who did. 3 of my friends are dead because of something that got into our car on a stretch of highway in the mountains of Colorado. And I've spent every day since trying to understand what happened and why I was allowed to live when they weren't. I was 24 years old at the time, a graduate student at the University of Colorado Boulder. My friends and I, Jessica, Marcus, and David, had planned a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains, a chance to escape the stress of midterms and enjoy the first snowfall of the season. We'd rented a large SUV, packed it with food and alcohol and enough warm clothing for a small army, and headed west on Highway 72 as the sun was setting. The drive should have taken about 2 hours. The weather was clear, the roads were dry, and we were in high spirits, singing along to music and laughing at jokes that probably weren't as funny as we thought they were. Jessica was driving, Marcus was in the passenger seat, and David and I were in the back. Everything changed about an hour into the trip, when we stopped to pick up what we thought was a stranded hiker. The figure was standing on the shoulder of the road near a trailhead that led into the national forest. It was bundled in heavy winter clothing, a thick coat with the hood pulled up, face obscured by the darkness. One arm was raised, thumb extended in the universal hitchhiker's gesture. Jessica started to slow down. Marcus said we shouldn't pick up strangers, that it wasn't safe, but the temperature had dropped below freezing, and the idea of leaving someone stranded in the mountains felt cruel. We had plenty of room. The cabin was only another hour away. What was the harm? Jessica pulled over, and David rolled down his window. He asked the figure where they were headed, if they needed a ride. The figure said nothing, just stood there on the shoulder, arm still raised. There was something wrong with its proportions. I noticed it before the others did. The way the arms seemed too long, the way the legs beneath the coat didn't quite match the stance of a normal person. I started to say something, started to tell Jessica to drive away, but before I could get the words out, the figure moved. It didn't walk to the car. It flowed, like water or smoke, a single fluid motion that brought it from the shoulder of the road to the back seat of our SUV. One moment, the space between me and David was empty. The next, it was occupied by something wearing winter clothes that suddenly seemed too thin, too insubstantial to hide the shape beneath. The smell hit me first. Rot and copper and something else. Something I couldn't identify but that made my stomach turn and my eyes water. Then I felt it pressing against me, cold seeping through my jacket, cold that seemed to radiate from wherever the thing touched me. David screamed. He opened his door while the car was still moving and threw himself out onto the highway. I heard him hit the asphalt, heard the thud of his body rolling, but I couldn't look away from the thing that was now sitting where he'd been. Its hood had fallen back. What I saw beneath was not a face, not in any way that word could be meaningfully applied. It was an absence, a void where features should have been, surrounded by skin that looked like it had been stretched over a skull that was shaped wrong, that had too many angles and not enough curves. Jessica was screaming now too, fighting to control the car while trying to look at what was in the back seat. Marcus had turned around, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. The thing moved its head, that featureless void rotating slowly until it faced him. Marcus made a sound I've never heard a human being make before or since. A whimper, a plea, a prayer, all compressed into a single syllable of pure fear. Then the thing reached out with one of its two long arms and touched his face. He didn't die immediately. That would have been a mercy. Instead, Marcus went silent, his body rigid, his eyes open, and staring at nothing. Whatever the thing had done to him, he was no longer in that car with us. His body was there, but Marcus was gone. Jessica lost control. The car veered off the road, crashing through a guardrail and plunging down an embankment. I felt the impact, felt the airbags deploy, felt glass shatter around me. Then everything went dark. When I woke up, the car was on its side, wedged between two pine trees at the bottom of a shallow ravine. It was completely dark except for the dashboard lights which flickered weakly in the destroyed cabin. I was hanging from my seatbelt, gravity pulling me toward the ground, pain radiating from what felt like every part of my body. Jessica was in the driver's seat, suspended above me. Her neck was bent at an angle that told me everything I needed to know. Marcus was still in the passenger seat, eyes still open, face frozen in that expression of terror. But there was no breath fogging in the cold air, no rise and fall of his chest. And the thing was still in the back seat. It sat in the wreckage as if nothing had happened, that void where its face should have been pointed directly at me. I could feel it watching, studying, deciding. The cold radiating from it was even more intense now, frost forming on the windows around us, my breath crystallizing in the air. I should have died. By every law of nature, I should have joined my friends in whatever fate had claimed them. But instead, the thing spoke. Its voice wasn't sound, wasn't vibration in the air. It was pressure, words pressed directly into my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. It said it had taken what it came for. It said Marcus had been chosen long before that night, had been marked by something he'd done years ago. It said Jessica and David were unfortunate collateral, wrong place at wrong time. It said I was different. It said something protected me, something it didn't want to challenge. It said I would live, but I would remember. I would carry the weight of this night for the rest of my life, would never be able to explain what had really happened, would always know that there were things in the darkness that could take people without warning and without explanation. Then it left, not through the doors which were crumpled and jammed, but through the void where its face should have been, collapsing into itself until there was nothing left but the frost on the windows and the cold that seemed to sink into my bones. I was found the next morning by a search and rescue team. David's body was discovered on the highway, killed by the impact of his fall from the moving car. Jessica and Marcus were still in the wreckage, both dead from what the coroner would later describe as massive trauma consistent with the vehicle collision. But Marcus's face haunted the coroner. In the report, which I obtained years later through a Freedom of Information request, she noted that his expression was inconsistent with typical accident victims and that there appeared to be evidence of extreme psychological distress immediately prior to death. The official cause was ruled as blunt force trauma, but I know the truth. Marcus died the moment that thing touched his face. His body just took a while to realize it. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital recovering from my injuries. The police interviewed me multiple times trying to understand why we'd stopped, why David had jumped from a moving car, why the accident had happened at all. I told them we'd stopped for a hitchhiker who was never found, that something had scared David, that I didn't remember much after that. They didn't believe me. They thought I was in shock, that trauma had garbled my memories. Maybe that was easier for everyone to accept. A hitchhiker who was never found was just a confused recollection. The alternative was too impossible to consider. I dropped out of graduate school. I couldn't concentrate on studies, couldn't pretend that research papers and thesis deadlines mattered after what I'd experienced. I moved back home with my parents, took a job at a local library, built a small, quiet life that kept me away from mountain roads and late-night driving and anything that reminded me of that night. But I still dream about it. I still see the void where the thing's face should have been. Still feel the cold radiating from its body. Still hear its voice pressing words into my mind. It said something protected me. It never said what. I've spent years trying to understand that protection, trying to figure out why I was spared when my friends were taken. I haven't found any answers. Maybe there aren't any. Maybe I was just lucky in a way that feels more like a curse than a blessing. Marcus had been chosen, the thing said. Marked by something he'd done years ago. I've gone through his entire life looking for what that might mean. He was a good person, kind and thoughtful. The least likely of anyone I knew to have done something deserving of such a fate. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe the things in the darkness have their own criteria, their own logic, their own reasons for choosing the people they take. I visit the crash site every year on November 11th. I bring flowers for Jessica and David, I say prayers for Marcus, and I stand there in the cold, looking at the guardrail that's been replaced, the trees that still bear scars from the impact. And sometimes, when the wind blows just right, I feel that cold again. That unnatural, bone-deep cold that radiates from something that shouldn't exist. I know the thing is out there somewhere, moving through the darkness, waiting for the next marked person to cross its path. I know I'll never truly be safe, no matter how small and quiet I keep my life, because whatever protected me that night might not protect me forever. And if the thing decides it wants me after all, there won't be anywhere I can hide. The thing in the back seat taught me that some passengers don't need doors to enter your car. Some passengers choose you long before you see them on the side of the road. And some passengers don't leave when you reach your destination. They stay with you forever, in your dreams, in your memories, in the cold that never quite leaves your bones.